Hey everybody, it's Aurora from Aurora's Apothecary, and it is the heat of the summer right now. We're almost in the 90s, maybe it did hit 90 here today, and it's very hot out. So we are just beginning July, and July means flowers. Most of our herbs that we harvest are in their flowering stages right now. So if we're going to harvest the herb for the flower, now is the perfect time. So some of our flowers that we're harvesting right now are elderflower, rose, yarrow, and the St. John's wort. So today I harvested, I do have some in my garden, but we went out harvesting. We found a lot of them in two nice spots, so I harvested quite a bit of St. John's wort. The harvest time on St. John's wort, they call it St. John's wort because it has the lore that it blooms on St. John's Eve, which is right around midsummer, so June 21st. And here in Wisconsin, ours does not bloom at that time. So I think that folklore comes from maybe Europe, and it probably does bloom there at that time where it's a little bit warmer. So here, right around the 4th of July is when ours bloom. So that's kind of easy for me to remember, like, ooh, it's time to get the St. John's wort, 4th of July. One thing that we have to deal with when dealing with the St. John's wort is St. John's wort has one predator, and it is called the St. John's wort beetle. I had a crop growing and it got totally decimated by this shiny beetle. I messaged a friend of mine who is an herbalist and a naturalist, and he told me, gave me the specs on it, and it's called the St. John's wort beetle, and it was put out by the government to eradicate this terrible, terrible, noxious weed that is everywhere. So if you're going to get St. John's wort, make sure you get it before the beetles get it. And if you're growing St. John's wort, it's always something to watch. The beetles are easy to take care of. I just knock them off and squish them. Today I knocked them all off and squished them with my feet. So now I have a beetle-free St. John's wort. There's a lot of things that are yellow at this time growing. St. John's wort is about 2 feet tall and gets a yellow flower on it. And when you squish St. John's wort, it gives off a red colorant. I don't know if you can, oh yes, you can definitely see that I'm red there. And that red oil, that's where a lot of our medicine is. So we want to harvest them right at their peak. And when I use this oil, I make it into an infused oil. So I put it in olive oil and I let it sit. And I usually do, you can do the month cold infusion with it, or I do a heat infusion with, I put mine in a paper bag. So I put the flowers in the oil and then I put it in a paper bag and I sit it out somewhere sunny. So what I'm getting is not the light from the sun because it hits the paper bag, but I'm getting the heat. And then it infuses just a little bit quicker. And I'm using a fresh herb in an oil, which is always kind of a no-no. You always run the risk of getting bacteria in there. So when you use that heat, it makes the process go a little bit faster and then a little less risk of the bacteria. So like I said, I put it in an oil and this ends up in our super healing salve, which we can't call it that anymore, so we call it our super salve. But St. John's wort has great healing properties for the skin. And I have one customer that she buys the St. John's wort from me just as is, and she puts it straight on her skin and she swears it keeps her wrinkles away. All right, now one thing that we make with it also is a tincture, and I fully believe that wherever you are, if there's a plant that's growing in abundance, it's because you need it that year. So there's some plants that you'll find a lot of. St. John's wort, there's been many years where we haven't found hardly any St. John's wort, and that's why I started growing it myself. But this year is an abundant year for St. John's wort, and it's known as the depression herb. It helps depression and anxiety, and it's all over right now. And I think with what's going on in the world, it's really what we need. So we do make a tincture out of it, which makes it easy to take every day. So that is our St. John's wort tincture. We used to call it our Zen tincture, if you're familiar with that. And that's available online or at any of our stores. So that is St. John's wort. And if you guys have any questions, you can leave them in the comments or get a hold of us or stop in and talk to one of our experts. Have a great day.